Hello. Oh, it's on now. Hi, guys and gals. We are going to get going in just a moment. It is 1:45. Thank you for those of you who are back. If you're in the lobby and you can hear me, start making your way.
Hey Randy, just checking in because you and Cynthia are gonna be our first Red Bull player.
Steve Spar. Were you corralling people on the way in? I hope so. Come back, friends. Come back.
All right, see you soon. We're about to get started. All right, see you soon.
Please come in and be seated. Raise your hand if you thought that this morning you were going to get a second shower today. No, did not think I was going to. But here we are, soaked to the core and still having a great time.
You know, Marisa, as we start to come about for this opening, and before you officially open, I could tell a joke, a Better Angels joke.
Please.
It was about these two Better Angel delegates that went into a bar, and they were followed by Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, and then they were followed by a minister and a rabbi and a priest. And the bartender looked up and said, "Is this some kind of joke?"
Bump.
So next time, you'll be in your seats on time.
All right, friends. So we are back in session, and hopefully everybody enjoyed the breakouts and the debates. I know I did. Yeah, really good stuff shared. So we are going to kick things off with our next red-blue pair. And so I am really tickled to be able to invite up Cynthia Berkshire and Randy Leos. Cynthia is a red from Santa Monica who serves as the co-chair of the Southern California Alliance. And Randy is a blue from Orange County who serves as the Southern California coordinator, and he directs the California office and a contributor to Better Angels Media. So basically, Randy is an overachiever. Welcome, Randy. And Cynthia.
Thank you. Our story is really one of partnership as opposed to conflict. I attended last year's convention as a closeted Red. I am from Santa Monica, California. Bluer than blue, navy blue is often assigned to the spot. It's a place where one is assumed to be a Democrat by virtue of your zip code. The day after the 2016 election, my children, who attended a private school on the west side, classes were stopped to bring in grief counselors to deal with the needs of the children. So I was leaving a place where I felt very great intolerance. Came to, you can imagine, a BA convention where within hours I met nothing but tolerance. People listening, engaging in skills workshop, and well-behaved. I was emboldened by that, and so when the USA Today reporter, who was doing an article trying to find reds in blue states and blues in red, was happy to speak with him. And when I later learned that he would include my name in his article and identify me as a red, thought nothing of it until I mentioned it to my tribe at home. My son said, Mom, please don't. It will taint my relationships with my friends. And my husband suggested it wasn't the best way to move into the new neighborhood, that I perhaps had not, we had just moved, and perhaps that was not the way to go. So lucky for him, the reporter that is, I introduced him to my new best red friend, Greg Steinberger, who's here somewhere, who is an actor, a red actor in Los Angeles. So you can imagine the great story and fodder that he provided for that article. When I left the convention last year, I really wondered how we were going to do this in California. California is an interesting story. A notoriously blue state. 2016, 56 of our 53 congressional districts went blue. Candidates fundraise in California, but hardly feel compelled to campaign outside of a Silicon Valley living room. So given BA's commitment to balance, I left the convention wondering what kind of work we would actually be able to do in California. How would we pull enough reds and blues into the room? I then partnered with Randy. We were moderators and doing workshops, and that's where the magic began. Randy has taken that the next step and is trying to get BA off the ground in California as a whole. I think California's an important test case and important work that Randy's doing, my partner.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. And I wanted to say that Cynthia has been an amazing partner. She's been so generous, but also really thoughtful and just an amazing person to talk to about just conversations about things that really matter. And hers is a voice that I so value having in my life. And, it is a little bit ironic that she sees the state as just a blue state, because I really try to see it as more of a diverse state. And in the 7 years that I've lived there, the diversity of California has actually kind of shocked me a little bit. I moved from Michigan and grew up in New York, but in California I've actually been exposed to a lot more diverse voices than I had expected. I'm a Jew from New York who happens to be an atheist, and one of my best friends is an evangelical Christian in California who's a conservative, and it's fantastic, the diversity that we have there. We also have a lot of political diversity, but a lot of it is kind of underground at this point. I've spoken to so many people, and my friendship with Cynthia has really exposed me to the idea that there are so many conservative voices in California that don't really feel that they can make themselves heard, and they feel locked out of the conversation. So one of the major things that we want to do with the California office is to make sure that we account for all of the voices that exist in our community. We also want to make sure that we account for the demographic diversity in California, for the income diversity. A lot of people have been writing lately about the fact that we have the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor living side by side in a lot of our communities. And that's really important to acknowledge, and so it really speaks to the point that Better Angel's success in California is really tied along with our success nationally. And so I think that it's really important that we have a strong presence in California and that we allow all of those voices that exist in our communities to really be part of that conversation. So as Cynthia mentioned, we are starting this California office that is dedicated to taking on the unique challenges, but also the unique opportunities that we have in California. Obviously, there's great fundraising opportunities because there's so many foundations in California. There's also a great technology base that we can take advantage of. So one example of an initiative we're trying to do is reach out to our rural communities. People don't really realize that how much rural area that California has, which tends to be more red than the coastal areas. And we want to make sure that those people can actually have access to our programming. And so we want to use technology to reach out to them. So we're working with library networks to implement that technology because they're all well networked. And so that's one example of the ways that we can take advantage of California. So I just, before we go, I just want to mention that we have a social gathering that's happening at 9 o'clock tonight in Thomas Elliott B. Hall in the lounge. It's the first floor lounge. So it's that building right over there. And we're going to have California wines and beers available for people. All right. Cynthia was in charge of the wine selection, or helped out with wine selection at least. And that was definitely very good because I did not. I was out of my depth there. But yeah, we invite you to come by to have a word about the California office. And we actually have T-shirts that are on sale. And if you want to make a donation, then you can get a T-shirt for free for any donation above $50. So, and if you want to learn about the California office, better-angels.org/California. And thanks very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Randy and Cynthia are thanked. So we're now going to hear a presentation on what will be part of the platform tomorrow that we will go into in depth. This is the theory of change. This is about our view on how the change happens. To do that, we're going to have a presentation by Jim Ewell, delegate from Washington State, and Better Angels COO. Come on up, I'll give you this mic. And there's not going to be questions and answers after this. Oh, you're already mic'd. There's not going to be questions and answers after this. There's going to be a chance tomorrow to give input.
Great, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Good to see all these smiling faces out here. As Steve said, I'm Jim Ewell. I've had the privilege of serving for the last 9 months as the Chief Operating Officer of Better Angels. If you were here last night, you heard David Blankenhorn begin to talk about kind of the who, what, why, and how we're making this change that we seek to make, okay? And you remember what he said about how we're going to do this? What's the word he used? Love, exactly, okay? And I think he's absolutely right about that. However, I'm a detail guy. I'm an operations guy. And David, I'm sorry, I just need a little more detail.
The big picture, Jim.
Yeah, the big picture is love. But really, how are we going to do this, right? Do you ever get that skepticism? You know, I tell people, hey, you know, what we're trying to do is to reduce the polarization and reduce all this. People say, oh yeah, you got a big job ahead of you, you know, sort of thing. So how are we going to do it? Well, I want to introduce you to this thing we call the theory of change. And this came out of a retreat that Better Angels leaders did in Donna's home, okay, in January or February. And there's a lot of stuff up here, but I really want to reduce it to just 5 planks, okay? So, starting with changing ourselves, changing institutions, thought leadership, Reflect America, and partners. Let me drill down on each one of these, starting with changing ourselves. There's something magic that just happens when we bring a red and a blue together in the same room in an atmosphere of respect and openness and willingness to learn, okay? It's just magic that happens, all right? And people find that they have more in common than they've been told. And we, absolutely, right? And we know how to do that. We are extraordinarily good at that. People ask me sometimes, what's your competitive advantage, right? They business school people, right? Or what's different about you? And this is something that, due to Bill's design and all you great moderators and organizers, we just know how to do it. It's in our DNA to do that, okay? But there's another aspect of changing ourselves that I think we also need to address. And Bill has come up with a new, I call them products, I call him our product guy, okay? He's constantly coming out with new things. And it's what we call the Within Workshop, right? So one of the biggest sources of polarization is not when we have a red and a blue together, but it's when we are in our own groups, right? Greg Smith told us a story the other day on a leadership call. He was trying to get someone to attend, a friend of his from early on, from elementary school or something like that, years, friend of years, and somebody was in the police force with him. He invited him to the world premiere of our documentary. And he got an email back from him that said something like, "Why are you fraternizing with those Muslims and baby killers?" I think that was a phrase they used, right? And, you know, Greg, bless his heart, okay, he responded in, you know, the most Christian way and to him. And he told me earlier today, he said, "You know, I'm going to keep working that guy, you know. I'm going to keep working that guy. If you know Greg, that's what he's going to do," right? But we have to do that too. We have to depolarize within our own. Reds to reds, blues to blues. Now, as much as that is the foundation of what we do and absolutely essential to what we do and the thing that we are extraordinarily good at, I think it's necessary but not sufficient. I think we also have to change institutions. And the three institutions that I think we need to focus on the most are changing government at all levels, federal, state, and local. We need to change education, again, at high schools, colleges, law schools, graduate schools, across the board. And we need to change the media. And the reason we need to change the institutions, thank you, is that they have an impact on everyone else. Let's take the media, for example, right? If we have a media that just inflames and not informs, it makes our job harder. So the more that we can do to change those institutions, it helps us change ourselves. And then if we get a sufficient number of people, then those institutions have to change, right? They have to listen if we have enough people, okay? So it's what's known as a virtuous cycle. You've probably heard a vicious circle, right? Things just keep going downhill, right? Well, there's also something called a virtuous cycle where things get better and better. It's not as common, people don't use the term as much, but it's absolutely out there, and that's what we got to get going. Now, let's talk about some examples of how we might change some of those institutions. And I want to start with an example from Tom Smerling, okay, in Maryland, all right? So Tom and 5 other moderators held 2 red-blue workshops simultaneously with the Municipal League of Maryland. If you don't know about the Municipal League, there's one in every state, and it's the mayors. Many times, the mayors who attend are the mayors who are from smaller rural cities or mid-sized cities or whatever. And the thing about mayors is they cannot afford to be excessively partisan. As one of them said to Tom, look, garbage pickup and snow removal are not red-blue issues, right? We have to be able to get things done as mayors, right? And it was a tremendous success. They loved it. They wanted to hear more from them. And I would love to see that particular thing, you know, replicated across every state. In every one of your states, you've got a municipal league, and they are the mayors, and they're a place to start, okay? But I'm also excited about our public policy alliances. This is another way in which we affect government, right? Just imagine if we had reds and blues together calling on every single member of Congress and saying to them, look, here are policies that we as reds and blues have come up together with, right? That would be remarkable. It would be something that would just really start to get their attention. The second area is educational institutions. I'm super excited about debates, okay? We're going to bring debates to high schools and colleges, and just tell me about it, April. We're going to do it, right? And that's great, okay? But I want to tell you about another way in which we can affect educational institutions, and one that we've already done. I'd like to turn it over to Bill Doherty for just a minute. You can grab a microphone to talk about a remarkable thing that he did in Edina.
Yeah, so Edina, Minnesota, upper middle class suburb of Minneapolis. 2 parent leaders attended Better Angels workshops, and a light bulb went off. This is a community, like other communities around the country, that is polarized red-blue around the education of children, with conservative parents and students feeling like there is a kind of liberal brainwashing and that a kind of a silencing of conservative viewpoints. And this got into a social media warfare. It affected the school board election. Friendships were lost over this. And they invited us to help them. And what we did was we used a modified fishbowl for parent leaders. We did household conversations, 5 red, 5 blue parents, and when we asked them to reflect on what their values and aspirations were for their children's education in the area of social and political developments. And you know what? They were a lot more alike than they realized. And then we also asked them, what are your reservations or concerns about how your own side has come across in this conflict? And they did it. They did it. And then we said, where do you want to go next? And these folks have been going letters to the editor. They're saying we're going to show up together at the school board. The next thing we're doing is teacher education around political diversity. This has been off the radar screen. And so we have a group of teachers who have signed up. And then the next step after that, the school board, the superintendent. We're going to keep going.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Media. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you this one's easy. This is the hardest nut, okay? But we are starting to set examples through Better Angels Media, okay, of what can be done. If you haven't checked out some of John and Kieran's work lately, go read John's There Are Evils Worse Than Racism that he did a few months ago, okay? It's a great example of how we're going to change the media, okay? Or listen to Kieran's latest podcast with Ezra Klein, okay? We're going to change the media as well. The next area down is Reflect America, okay? And I'm not going to say too much about this because David said something about it last night and Donna talked about it. Essentially, we cannot represent we the people unless we are we the people. We've got to have diversity, not only red and blue, but socioeconomic and in every other kind of way, okay? The last piece is partners. As I said, we are extraordinarily good at the red-blue workshops, okay? But there are other areas where there are people in this space who they do other things really, really well. And we can learn from those people, okay? We have a number of partners here at the conference, okay? So Keith Allred, could you stand up? Keith is from NICD. We have Mary Gaylord from Living Room Conversations is right over here, okay? And Bruce Markin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name, from Climate Change Lobby. He's a red from the Climate Change Lobby. Is Bruce here? Okay, Bruce is right over there. Look, so I just want to tell you about one thing that NICD has done, okay? Thank you for coming, by the way. But NICD, they have worked with state legislators around the country, okay? I think they've done, how many, 30?
16 state legislatures, 1,000 legislators.
1,000 legislators, 16 different states. That's remarkable, okay? We have not done anything like that. They are the gold standard for how to do this. They bring in, they use as moderators, legislators themselves, okay? They go to all the major conferences. They do everything that needs to be done there. And so we can find ways to work with them and make things happen in that particular area, okay? We'll talk about just 2 more things, okay? And I will hit my time. Just give me 2 more minutes, okay? All right. Next slide, Kieran. I want to talk about something we call the tipping point of influence, okay? There's some research from Rochester Institute that suggests that just 1% of a population, if sufficiently motivated and passionate and equipped, they can begin to change the other 99%. Now that sounds crazy until you start looking at some of the organizations that are part of the national conversation, right? Does the NRA and the Sierra Club, do they have impact on our national conversation? Absolutely, all right? There are 320 million Americans, right? So NRA is, roughly 1.5%, something like that. Sierra Club's roughly 1%. So here's the thing. If we can get up to the numbers of 1 to 1.5 million members, sort of at the bottom of that list, there is no question in my mind that we will have a huge influence. Now, here's the thing. You cannot go from 7,000 members to 1.5 million members overnight. You just can't do that, right? I'm a startup guy. I ran 3 startups, okay? And here's what you do in a startup. First, you get past the I'm going to survive phase, okay? We are past that, all right? Then you go to the expansion phase, and that's where you're really figuring out how do you get beyond the early adopters in this room and you go mainstream. And that is our task at hand. How do we get to all these people, all the people that you know, and how do we get to that you routinely encounter people who are aware of Better Angels? That is our challenge, to do that. Not to get to 1.5 million, but how do we get from 7,000 to 70 to 100,000? So 1 order of magnitude, okay? That's our real challenge. And we've done a lot of thinking about that and trying to put together some programs for that. But that is what we are focused on, is trying to do that, not just the 1.5 million, okay? But if we can do that, we can change the country. Last slide. I want to ask you to do 2 things, okay? One, could you back up 2 slides, Kieran? Sorry. As you look at these 5 planks, okay, I want you to look and see, where do I naturally, feel affinity, right? Do I really enjoy the red blue workshops and the moderation and all that sort of stuff, and I want to do the conversation? Great, we need that, absolutely. Do I want to talk about changing government or changing educational institutions or whatever your interest? But I encourage you to look up there and say, where can I make a difference? Okay? Number 2, go 2 slides. I want to ask you to do one more thing. Kieran said 4 by the 4th of July, and that's great, okay? That's very quick, in the next 2 weeks, get 4 more members. But this isn't just a sprint, it's a marathon. And so here's what I want to ask of you. Can you do 5 red members and 5 blue members by the end of the next quarter, so that by the end of September 30th, okay? Imagine if you could do that. And you could do that the next quarter and the next quarter, okay? And everybody in this room just did that, okay? And at the next convention, people pledged to do that, and so forth. How long do you think it would take us to get to 1.5 million members? How long? Just 4 years. So it's as simple as 5 reds and 5 blues a quarter. If you can get that many members to us, okay, we can really make a difference and we can make the change that we want to see happen. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Jim. I feel fired up. It's like, shut up and take my money. I'm ready. Very cool. All right, so one thing that Jim didn't mention is that we are going to have more discussion tomorrow on the theory of change, and we'll have some Q&A. So I wanted to mention that. I also am going to call up Bill Doherty. Just kidding, it's going to be Kelly, to talk about the next sessions, the next breakout sessions. And in case I don't have a chance to tell you when Kelly's done, we are going to meet back here for a break at 4:30, and then we're going to have a session at 5. So after your breakouts, we're going to come back here at 4:30. The break is here at 4:30, right outside here. You can get your snacks at 4:30, and then we'll be seated back in here at 5.
Hi, everyone. Did you enjoy the shower earlier? I did. It was very nice. So hopefully the weather will cooperate for the rest of the day. I want to first mention there's a couple of you who may be here, you're commuters or you came late and you still need a meal card. I have Elizabeth Jufra, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Linda Moore, and Douglas Spry. So if you're one of those people, I will meet you outside the doors in a moment. Okay. Are you here? Any of those 3 people here, actually just raise your hand so I'm aware. They might not. Okay. All right, well, if you bump into one of those folks, send them my way. We are going to now dismiss to our breakout sessions in the afternoon. Could you pull up your folders again? Those trusty folders? Now, if for some reason you don't have your folder, Leah will take care of you at the info desk. She has a list of the breakout sessions that you've selected. But if you do have your folder, take a look and look for Friday PM. There will only be one session listed. Some of you are going to exploratory sessions, public policy, strategic partnerships, influencing the media, or Reflect America. If one of those sessions is your sessions, raise your hand. So you're going back up the hill, folks. So those of you who cannot go back up the hill by foot are going to be taken in the golf cart by none other than Kieran O'Connor, who's been known as a bit of a reckless driver apparently on the golf cart, so hang on, folks. But he will also take you back afterwards here at the break at 4:30. So he will meet you outside at the golf cart. If you want to get started going out to the golf cart now, please go ahead. And Kieran, you are responsible for checking in the rooms to make sure people that came with you come back, okay? All right, we're entrusting you to Kieran. You're in good hands. The rest of you are going back up to Siegel. So if I could have John Wood stand, please. Donna Murphy, Mel Pine, Tom Smerling, Steve Saltwick, and Riley Hart, as well as David Lapp. You are all, these are the moderators for these sessions. If the moderators could head on outside, you will congregate. You're all going to the same building. So moderators head out, and if you're heading to Siegel Hall, please start to collect your things and head outside to go back up the hill to your sessions. Enjoy. We're giving you lots of exercise here, people. Lots of steps, right? All right. Yeah, all the other sessions, if you're not going to one of the 4 sessions I mentioned, stay here. If you're not in public policy, strategic partnerships, influencing the media, or Reflect America, don't move. If your folder says debate 1, debate 2, if you're in a debate, if you're in the depolarizing within workshop, if you're in the debate chair training, or one of the issues workshops, education or healthcare, or you're doing a workshop on immigration, you all stay here for now. I'd like to first dismiss the debate chair training. So April Lawson will be your fearless leader, our debates expert. We are going to head outside in just 1 minute. Let's give the other folks a second to get out. You will find April and you will walk up together to do the debate chair training. So April, why don't you start heading outside? And those of you who are in debate chair training can now get up and go out and find April. Those of you who are going to either the debate on business, consumption, and the environment, debate 1, or debate 2 on social and economic equality in America, you don't have to leave the building. If it rains, you will not get wet, folks. Good news. The South 40 private dining room for business, consumption, and the environment, being chaired by Rob Robertson, is just down this hall. Go out the door, go down, turn slightly, and it will be there. You will find him there. So if you're in the business, consumption, environment, debate 1, you can get up and head out. The second debate on social and economic inequality in America, chaired by Leah Labresco. Wonderful. Leah, if you could come stand up here in the aisle so people get a good look at you. You are heading just into the sort of dining area right outside across the lobby. So you can follow Leah if you're doing social and economic inequality in America, debate number 2. The Future of Healthcare in America Issues Workshop. Is Rachel Bailey here? Yes, Rachel, if you could come stand in the aisle here. If you're going to the Future of Healthcare in America workshop, you're going to follow Rachel to the Liggett Koenig low-level seminar room. Do you know where that is, Rachel? He's not. I think he may have left already. Oh yes, Bruce McKenzie, are you here? Bruce? Rachel, I am going to ask you to walk the folks over to that room, if you could do so, just in case Bruce... I think Bruce may already be there, but just in case not. Thank you, Rachel. I'll come check on you guys, Rachel, all right? See if Bruce shows up. All right, so if you're going to Healthcare in America, follow Rachel to the Liggett Koenig lower level seminar room. If you're going to the Education, School Choice, and Free Speech on Campus Issues Workshop number 1, you're going to follow Cynthia O'Brien and Randy Leoz. Randy, can you come in the middle here so people can get a look at you, and then head on out. All right, if you're going, George Buhassan, is he here? He may already be in the room. George? Okay, so if you're going to the 6th workshop on immigration, you are going to the South 40 Meeting Room 1, which is literally right behind the coffee from this morning. So you're going to go out the door, and it's the first meeting room right there by the Better Angels sign. You can get up and go into your room. And that leaves the Depolarizing Within workshop. Are you nodding, folks? Are you the Depolarizing Within workshop people? Please come forward. Please stand up and come sit towards the front of the room. Bill Doherty is going to be moderating. So if you could gather your things and try to get close enough that we can have a more intimate conversation. Thank you.
I will turn them on and leave them up here. And then when you call out for it. Hey, Bill, can I interrupt? Sorry, guys.
they're live streaming this. So in order for people
Then, hello everyone. The last shall be first. To dinner. We'll just go over the old jokes, and now they're wondering out there, what the heck is this all about? So this workshop is based on the problem of how we spread polarization by how we talk to people, like-minded people, about those others. And we practice often what I call the 4 horsemen of polarization: stereotyping, dismissing, ridicule, and contempt. And we have this illusion often that if, like at the next election, we defeat the other side, things are going to be fine. As somebody said in one of our Red Blue workshops, Red said, we get this idea that if our side gets 51%, we have a mandate. And then 2 years later, the other side gets 51%. And then they have a mandate, and we get nothing done. And then somebody else said, neither side is going to vanquish the others, so we're going to have to figure out how to get along and run the country together. So as we retreat into our political silos, people on the other side become not just strangers, but enemies. And so the idea behind this workshop is, how do we depolarize ourselves individually, and how can we be agents of depolarization in our own political communities? So this workshop is not about how you talk to the other, it's how you talk to somebody in your own side when the conversations devolve. So the goals are for you to have more awareness of your own inner polarizer, our own inner polarizer, how to counteract it, and skills for being critical but without being stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, and using contempt. And then skills in how to intervene, as I said, in one's own political side without getting fired from your own group. Okay? So I want to make one thing really clear, and that is, I'm talking about how we think and talk about millions of people on the other political side. This is not about what you say or think about a particular politician. Okay? If you end up in a conversation saying or listening to people say, all of those people who support Trump, or all of those climate crazies, or all of those social justice war, and we are talking about millions of your fellow Americans with stereotyping, dismissing, ridicule, and contempt, that's what this workshop is about, how not to do. You may think a particular politician is hypocritical, feel free. So this is about how we think about our fellow Americans. You get that? So it's not asking you to be wishy-washy about a politician who you don't like very much. So given those goals, I'd like to ask a few of you to say why you came to this workshop. And we're going to need to have people talk into this so that they're not completely out of it back there. So would somebody like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and why you came to this workshop?
This is Nancy Dixon, and I came because my group in Austin has done a lot of workshops now in Red Blue, and now we want to see what this is about. But having heard Bill just now, I got a lot better reason for coming.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, somebody else, why you came? Yeah, Tom.
Tom Sylvester. Most of my political debates are with friends who are also on the left, and we're arguing whether or not, acting out of love or civility is, effective or not. Is it worth doing or not? And I don't always want to come across as the, goody-goody scold for saying, oh, you're being mean, or you're not being thoughtful.
Yeah.
And so, trying to think about how I can do that effectively without just always being the annoying guy.
The annoying.
The hall
yes.
monitor,
there he
tone
goes
policing,
again. Yes, the super idealist, right? Or coming across as you have the higher moral ground. I am a better angel, and you're obviously not. So that doesn't work either, okay? So thanks for a couple of people having said that. And so now this is going to be the 2-hour version of a 3-hour workshop, so there'll be some stuff that I'll be kind of condensing a bit, so just be aware of that. But I'd like you, we're going to begin with a self-assessment tool, and it's the first page of your handout. recognizing my inner polarizer. So take a look at that. There are 6 questions to help you reflect on your thoughts, attitudes, and feelings about the large number of people who differ with you politically. Okay? So if somebody in the back could help me if others come in late to give them a handout. And I was supposed to have a lectern, and that hasn't arrived yet, but maybe it will. So I don't have to be just holding this. So keep in mind, now, this inventory is not how you feel about specific issues or specific politicians. It's about how you feel about the political other, okay? Those fellow Americans who differ from you. And it might be helpful for you to also not think about a particular relative, okay? But think about, if you're red, you might want to think about those Bernie supporters, those Democratic socialists. If you're a blue, to think about the people who like the wall or enthusiastic about the President Trump. So groups of people who sometimes what they say and what they believe you find appalling, and you think is bad for the country. Okay. So you disagree on issues. So I'm going to read the questions. And what I'm inviting you to do is to circle an answer for each of those. So is everybody willing to do this? You'll need a pencil. You willing to do it? Yeah, got it. Okay. So I'm going to read these, and I'd like you to circle. And bearing in mind, this is not a test of purity or something like this. This is we all do some of these things. So the first is, how often do I find myself thinking about those people on the other political side without much regard for the variation among them? Usually we're aware of great variation within our own group. So circle often, sometimes, or never. The second one, how often do I find myself assigning mainly self-serving or negative motives to the other group, and mainly positive motives to my own group? The other group are interested in power. My group wants to help people. So circle often, sometimes, never. The third one, how often do I find myself focusing on the most extreme or outrageous ideas and people of the other side, thereby making it hard to see how a reasonable person could remain in that group? Circle often, sometimes, and never. The next one, how often do I find myself comparing the worst people on the other side with the best people on my side? I got this from somebody who works in interfaith dialogue. And a principle in interfaith dialogue is don't compare my saint to your terrorist. The fifth one, how often do I feel a rush of pleasure with friends when we ridicule those crazies on the other political side? So this is the bonding, the good feeling of bonding and pleasure. Often, sometimes, never. And then the sixth one has been around in Better Angel circles for a while. Which of the following is closest to my overall emotional attitude towards the majority of people who support the other side? Circle the one closest to where you are now, and then the one you aspire to if they're different. Hate, they're enemies out to destroy the country. Disdain, they're ignorant and should know better. Pity, they're well-meaning but duped. Basic respect, they make contributions even if they're mostly off base. And respect and appreciation, they make unique contributions, unique and necessary contributions. So circle one that may be closest to where you are now, and one you aspire to if they are different. And so now I'm going to give you a moment to reflect on this. So it's a self-assessment tool. I'm going to ask you to take a minute to say what you learned from it, this assessment of interpolarization. And I'd like to suggest you keep the focus on your own attitudes and feelings, not on how difficult those other people are, not to hate. Okay, this is about self. This is not about them. Okay? This is also an exercise in humility rather than indirectly bashing those people who make you feel negative towards them. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and after that, I'm going to ask you to pair up with somebody you didn't come with to this convention, and to share whatever you learned from the self-assessment. So take a moment now. Okay, so when I give the signal, I'd like you to pair up with somebody. Don't leave some poor person alone at the end of an aisle. So you could do 3, but aim for 2s because you just have 4 minutes. So aim for 2s, 3s if necessary, and just share what you learned from this. 4 minutes. One more minute. Okay, if you could come on back. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, great. Thank you. So now, so if I could have everybody's attention, including in the back. Could you shush them, please? Shh. Hey, guys. Thank you. It's an old group leader trick. Don't start until everyone is stopped. But if you're like me, I want to get my last profound thought in. Okay. So now I'd like to invite some folks to just share with the group. You can delete names for this. You can just say who you are, or not say who you are, and just something you learned. Something you learned from this exercise, something you learned about yourself. Who'd like to go first?
What I learned from my partner is, well, there is one answer on here that I'm a little ashamed of when I really think about my behavior. But what I learned from my partner was she lives it and she sees it, and so she's learned to move away from it. So I feel hopeful that that's going to happen.
Do you feel like sharing the one that you feel bad about?
Sure.
Okay.
It's the one about number 5, getting pleasure and a rush from. And you know, I almost didn't circle it, and I thought, no, I'm going to be honest. I really do get that.
You're a people person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to tell you that in a workshop I did back in St. Paul, Minnesota, somebody said that, and so I said, so you like to get past that? She said, no, I like this. I want to keep this one. So who'd like to go next? Who'd like to go next? Something you learned. Yes.
The one I do the most is I'll compare the best of my group with the worst of the other group. Yeah. And that's an easy one to do. And then I think we both, Julie and I both talked about sometimes we cringe at some of the things our group does. But we don't use that, or at least I don't use that when I'm comparing myself to the other side.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Somebody else, something you learned. Yes.
So it was interesting to hear one of my group members' feedback about, how just this awareness of how Trump's election impacted them. And it connected for me personally, just looking at my responses. And what I realized is that if I would have taken this 2 years ago, my answers would have been very different. And somehow I developed this belief that the polarization in society kind of missed me, and I'm here to help everybody else.
Being a generous spirit that you are.
I just want to be a better angel.
Yes.
And listening to the feedback from my group member about their experience, and also just seeing myself in this light, just kind of had a aha moment.
Yeah, you had a moment. Yeah, not as evolved as you hoped you were. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I hate personally giving up illusions about myself. So how about somebody from this side? Yes. No, just keep, this is all being filmed, so you don't have to say shameful secrets.
No. I realized about myself that, because I question myself when I get upset, when I get emotionally upset of something on the other side, one person in particular. And I've questioned myself, what is going on with me? Why do I react that way? And then in talking with my wonderful colleague, the red Patsy over here, we both shared a very similar sense, a very similar feeling about the compassion, our belief in Christ, and the sadness of the heart. So it was wonderful to come together on that.
And so what did you learn from this?
I learned that mine comes from compassion, and that if I can see it like that, I can release and overcome that, and to understand we are very similar.
Okay.
Other people have pain. They may act out of anger to cover the pain.
Okay.
Or say things that cover the pain.
So I want to stay
Okay.
with you a little bit.
Okay.
What did you learn about your polarizing self That's
Oh, my
yeah.
polarizing
Because
self.
that's your better angel
Yeah,
there.
yes,
What'd you learn
my-
about your polarizing self, if anything?
Yes, that because of that, I tend to pull away instead of wanting to create this connection and oneness with the person. Because of my pain, I pull away, and
You
I
pull
don't
away.
want to be open
Got it.
to hear them in a different way.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Somebody else. What you learned? Yeah.
What I'm learning about myself isn't so much the other side being wrong. It's because one of the things on number 6 is pity because they're feeling duped, getting into basic respect because many of us are duped. And the issue isn't I disagree with them, it's when people hold on to their ideology so hard and they're so shallow. There might be a good answer they have, but they haven't researched it. They're just, this is what I believe and that's it.
And so what did you learn about your own inner polarizer?
That I have to be careful that I stay in the respect regardless of the reason.
Yeah, okay, and not go back to pity.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. And pity, you know, if you're coming from disdain, pity feels like progress. Right, right. But it's interesting because respect can, when I don't understand how people could come to that belief, then instead of trying to find out how they got there, which may take some research and some talking to people, it's easy to go to, well, they're duped. They're following their leaders blindly. Nothing wrong with them. But then I'm kind of lapsing from my own better angel, which is to try to find out what this is about for, again, large numbers of people. Okay. So any other one that anybody wanted to get in before we finish? Hold it to your
Sorry.
mic.
I think the main thing that I learned in answering these questions was that I often just go along with outrageous statements made by my friends and others who are on my side, even though I know they're really not true, and I don't confront them.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I need to start saying, wait, you know, sometimes there is another side to look at.
Well, you're in the right workshop for that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Because, you know, when we let stuff go by that is stereotyping, ridiculing, contempt, and we know better, it kind of, I don't know, I feel diminished myself. Okay? It's sort of like if you hear somebody says something, you're white, and somebody says something racist, like, did I just let that go? Right? Or a man is saying something terribly patronizing about women. You know, it's like, and I just sort of chuckle along with the boys. It affects my soul. It affects my soul, right? So thank you for sharing those. And what you shared here, even as Better Angels delegates, is much like people in the community share. We all deal with these issues. I did this a training for moderators the other day about how to do a depolarizing workshop. They were doing this. They were talking the same stuff you did. This is just human. This is just human. Okay, so we're going to go on to a little presentation. The next part of your handout, strategies to counteract my inner polarizer. And I'm going to kind of breeze through this a little more quickly because we have a little less time than the regular workshop. But some following are ways to offset polarizing thoughts and feelings when you notice them arising in you. There are ways to edit the story the story we tell ourselves about other people. So if you want to think of this idea that we have a narrative, we have a story about the political other, all those other folks, and the story is often distorted from the sources of information we get from our own distortions. And so you can think of these as ways to edit the story that I've been telling myself. And the first is to challenge your stereotypes. Stereotypes, obviously, are how outsiders oversimplify, dismiss, lump together, and disparage the other. And based on Better Angels Red Blue workshops, where we ask each side to identify the most common stereotypes that they run into about themselves, okay, that's what we ask in the workshop. What do other people think of your side that's false, misleading, and negative? Blues tend to believe that reds are racist, anti-immigrant, uncaring about those in need, homophobic, anti-woman, anti-science, Bible thumpers. Okay? Reds tend to believe that blues are arrogant and elitist, favor big government for its own sake, are fiscally irresponsible, unpatriotic, anti-religious, against free speech when it's not politically correct, and hypersensitive snowflakes. And so if you're living in a red social environment, those stereotypes of blues are everywhere, and there's the knowing smiles. And if you're in a blue environment, the knowing smiles about what those other folks are, those Trump voters, or those, if you're on the other side, you say, Trump derangement syndrome, a lot of the blues have it. And then we can smile. And so these are the most common stereotypes out there that we have found in our workshops. So what are some ways to counter the stereotypes in your own thinking? First is, tell yourself that the other side is more varied than the stereotype. Not everybody is the same, okay? Not everybody who supports President Trump for the same reason or with the same level of enthusiasm. Not everybody who supports Medicare for all has the same viewpoint on it or has the same level of enthusiasm for it. So the other side is more varied. Second, acknowledge that their political views and motivations are no doubt more complicated than the rhetoric you've been hearing. I have a friend who says this is a truism you can say about almost anything important in life. I think it's more complicated than that. Okay? And so one of the ways we get into polarized thinking is we oversimplify the attitudes and thoughts of the other side. So I was having lunch with Bruce Moreland, who is a red. He's from Minnesota, and he is a red and a climate change activist. And he has a typology of 5 different ways to be why some folks are skeptical about the climate change. It's like, and there's people vary on all of that. Okay, and there's not all blues who are, for whom climate change is a big issue, who want the same kind of government solution, of highly regulated solution. There's variation. There's variation. And the thoughts and the ideas are more complicated than they seem. Third is to read and listen to thought leaders on the other side who present complex arguments. Okay? If you're a blue who thinks that, who maybe oversimplifies, read George Will's new book on conservatism. The guy is really smart. Even if you don't agree, he's a complex thinker. Reds sometimes put down the New York Times, or read Nicholas Kristof's columns, okay? There's some really smart people who write and think deeply about issues on the other side. And if you expose yourself to those folks, you can't rely on, well, these are just duped, right? Because there's some really smart people. The fourth is to recognize that life experiences inform people's views, and that those are likely to be different from your own. Somebody said the other day, it was in our general session, realizing that if he or she had been born in another state, they might be of a different color. Okay? If you grow up in a family that runs businesses, you're much more likely to be concerned about government regulation than you are if you grow up in a family of working class folks who never, for whom the safety net is the main thing. Okay? So life experiences inform us. The next is develop relationships with a variety of people who differ with you politically. Relationships tend to undermine stereotypes. That's the classic way you get past stereotypes, because you carry people around in your head. I'm doing a project now with police and African American men, and some of what the African American men have been saying, now when they're out and around, they carry George in their head. When there's a police car coming, they know officers. They know them as people, okay? And so you can't just put everybody in the same category. And it's the same thing with white police officers getting to know in depth African American men. And then you can't stereotype anymore when you actually have relationships. And then if you want to go all out, you can work on to develop an understanding of the history and current strands of thought on the other side. And in the workshop, and I just have one copy here, but I'm happy to email people, we have a sheet of readings for blues about conservatism and reds about liberalism, including some history, some of the current best thinkers in the field. And so if you really wanted to go all out, you would develop a complex, you would understand how conservatism came out of a reaction to the French Revolution. You learn about Edmund Burke. You learn about where a distrust of big government came from. It just didn't come out of William Buckley's head in the 1950s, okay? There is a tradition there, as well as a very complex tradition of liberalism where boomerangs back and forth, and the version we have now is not like the version of the early 19th century. So it gets more complicated, okay? And then you move away from stereotyping. So challenge your stereotypes. The next is to make depolarizing distinctions. So distinguish between positions and people. You can believe that a viewpoint is completely wrong without believing that everyone who holds it is stupid or ill-motivated. Distinguish between policies and core values. Policies are means to ends, ways to support or enact values, not the values themselves. People can differ sharply on policies like the role of government and have similar ultimate goals for the country and its people. So we might both want all of our children to have a good education. I don't know anybody who doesn't want that. But we may have different attitudes towards public schools versus charter schools versus private schools, and how do we fund public education, and the role of unions. We may differ on all of those. The problem is, if we differ on some of the means to the ends, then I think you want your kids to be educated. You don't want other people's kids to be educated. And if I think that of you, how do we have a civil conversation? Okay? Distinguish between inconsistency and hypocrisy. Resist the pull towards assuming that inconsistencies on the other side always reveal hypocrisy. Inconsistencies between stated values and actual behavior can also come from blind spots and from the inevitable tensions between competing values. So this idea is to be reluctant to assign the label of hypocrite to a large number of fellow citizens who disagree with you, even when their positions seem contradictory to you. You seem inconsistent to them as well. So I'm going to give an example from both sides. Blues who say that pro-life Reds only care about fetal life because after the kids are born, they don't want to help them. Okay, so are you really consistent? So if children mean that much to you, why do you abandon helping them once they're born? And therefore, what your agenda really is to control women. Do you see how powerful that is? And have you heard people say that kind of thing? Okay, right? Yeah, and a red one, and I heard this from a state senator who was that time the chair of the Human Services Committee in the state legislature of Minnesota. He said, social workers make their living off people being poor, and so therefore they have a stake in keeping people poor and dependent on the government. And this is part of a red, powerful stereotype. The hypocrisy. What you say is you're for lifting up poor people and supporting, but you're trapping them in dependency with your programs. Therefore, and by the way, why are you doing that? You want their votes. So you can stay in power. And therefore, you are a hypocrite. And now, I'm not saying that there aren't individual hypocrites out there. I'm not saying there aren't politicians. But when you take a whole swath of people and you say, because you see a tension, of course there's a tension between different values. Okay, of course there's a tension. But when we assign that, all the lights go off. And there's no possible way to interact with people. And so part of where we're heading in this workshop after the next little presentation material is that when you hear those from people in your political world, how do you speak up about it? How do you speak up skillfully when you hear those? So next page. So how to talk about the other side in a non-polarizing way. And what to avoid is using pejorative labels, wingnuts, Bible thumpers, libtards, snowflakes. Somebody the other day who attended the moderators thing, I hope he was kidding, said he was hesitant to give up wingnuts. Second to avoid is using the phrase they all, or its equivalent, the Democrats, the Republicans. Okay, as soon as you're doing those, you are now lumping together all of those people as if they are one person. And then painting all supporters of a politician with the same brush you use for the politician. If you go on a rant about a particular politician, make it clear that you are not putting all supporters in the same box. So, and the classic one now, because our President Trump is the one that everybody talks about, is blues going on a rant about President Trump and a threat to the country and so on. If you're going to do that, if you're blue and you feel strongly about President Trump, it could be useful to say, I'm not talking about everybody who supports him. You just put that into the conversation. It takes only a few seconds. You're still true to your views about that president. And again, you could do it with Joe Biden or anybody on the other side. You have a strong view about a politician, and then you say, I'm not talking about everybody who supports that person. What you have now done is prevented the kind of stereotyping that people might assume that you are into. The second is to criticize the idea or the policy, not the motives of everyone who holds it. This is, I was referring to before, blue example. Climate change denial is the riskiest idea I've seen in my lifetime because we're running out of time to prevent lasting damage to the planet, versus climate change deniers care more about the fossil fuel industry than about the planet. You see the difference? Huge difference, because the second one is about motivation. A red example, climate science is uncertain enough that I don't think we should start overhauling our way of life, versus climate change supporters have a liberal agenda to overregulate the economy and tax us to death. Have you all heard these out there? Okay. And what they are criticizing of motives, and they're actually pretty intellectually not very complex, right? You don't have to engage the ideas. You just attack the motives of the people. Third is to criticize your own side too. So there's a handout you could give that gentleman who just came in. We have some extras. We're losing that group because we haven't listened to them very well. Sometimes their leaders talk as if they have the final answer to such and such a problem. I don't think they do. One of the ways to avoid coming across in a polarizing way is to comment with criticism of your own side. And we do that in all of our workshops. If there's something kind of special about the design of like our red-blue workshops and some other workshops is we invite self-criticism. We invite self-criticism. The next one is to say something positive about the other side too. I read a liberal/conservative commentator who said something quite interesting about this. Or I think their criticism has some validity even if I don't agree with their solution. So if you can credit something from the other side, and often it could be some particular person you read or heard, this will depolarize you in the conversation. And then the last one is to try this eavesdropper thought experiment. How would a rational and well-intentioned member of the other group feel when listening to you describe their side? Would they feel respected, even if strongly disagreed with, or disrespected? Understood at least partly, or grossly misrepresented? There's some interesting psychological research on the advantage of thinking about how a third party would be responding if they were listening to me right now. In fact, I'm a couples therapist, so I'll give you, there's research on this one. So you have this ongoing argument with your spouse, and then there's this little intervention that's been proved effective. What would somebody say who cared about both of you and your relationship? What would they say about this conflict? It's a powerful little thought. You put it outside. Somebody who cares about both of us in a relationship. So in this case, and this is what getting involved with Better Angels, what I try to do, because I have all these I have these people in my mind and in my life, is how would so-and-so feel, or how would this person feel listening to me in this conversation? Would they feel ridiculed, disrespected? Would they feel like their ideas were presented in an exaggerated way? So that's another way to be critical but not polarizing. And so in finishing that part up, this is not about becoming namby-pamby. I just love everybody and everybody's, well, loving everybody is fine, but everybody's ideas are all great, okay? You can be sharply critical of the other side without stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, and being contemptuous. You can do all of that. You can do all of that. You can avoid doing all of that and still be critical. Okay, so the next exercise is for you to take a look at those 2 pages and ask yourself what you might take from what I just presented that could be useful to you. You may already do a number of these things, and in fact, you might be saying, I want to do them even more consciously. There may be a few new ideas in there for you. So what are your take-homes about what you might want to do in your own thinking or in your own behavior based on the last 2 pages? So take a couple minutes to say, what are you taking with you? And then I'm going to have you pair up. So take a few minutes right now. About 30 more seconds. Okay, when I say go, I'd like you to be back into your pairs. Now you ended up with 4. I know it's hard for groups to break up sometimes. It was just 3, okay. He's the press, that's right, yeah. So you can get in too, by the way. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so take 4 minutes, process something you've learned from this. Okay. All right. So, okay, great. Same question. What did you learn from this that was something you might want to work on that you'd be willing to share with the rest of your delegates here? Okay.
I was just noticing that on the how to talk to the other side in a non-polarizing way, like probably most of you, some of those things I know I already do, and because I do some publicly facing writing, I'm very aware of that. But there's one that's really hard, and that's saying something positive about the other side. I can do all those other things, but for some reason I just don't really want to do that.
So you really, really don't, or are you thinking maybe you could try? I want to try. You want to try, okay. But it sticks in you. It's like, you know. Right, okay. You could try the old things like even a clock that doesn't work is right twice a day kind of thing, or the blind pig sometimes gets the acorn or something. But those are not quite fully respectful, right. That's like by random chance, occasionally they have a good idea. Is not the spirit of this particular workshop. Anyway, so somebody else, something you learned. Yes.
I started the one about distinguish between inconsistency and hypocrisy.
Yeah.
So I realize that I have my own inconsistencies, so I have to look at those first.
Yeah.
And that I am quick to call it hypocrisy, so I want to look at that.
Yeah. So watch your use of the H word. Right. Okay. Does somebody else over here have one? Yeah.
I went back to page 3 because in our discussion, I realized how hard I make it on myself because I attach motives to the other person, like greed and other things that I think are causing them to take the kind of action that they're taking.
Yeah.
And then I shut down, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Why would you talk to a greedy person? Or if you're psychologically minded, you can say it was their childhood pathology. I'm a therapist. That's what therapists do, so that I can put you down by saying, you're not responsible for it. You were messed up as a kid. And that's the pity one. So who else wants to say something you took from this last part?
Mine had to do with the life experiences.
Okay.
I live in Arkansas.
Yeah.
We have a farm.
Yeah.
I carry a gun because we have wild pigs and big cats and poisonous snakes. So I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But I don't live in New York where you have gunfire going off all the time, and you wake up the next morning and Aunt Sue, who lives next door, was murdered last night.
Right.
So life experiences bring a whole lot to this.
Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely. Yes. And a great example of it. And it makes you more compassionate with people who have a very different view of the Second Amendment and so on. Yeah, great. Somebody else said? Yeah.
I find myself very much reading and listening to media that supports my view. So George Willis is also someone I admire, so I'm definitely going to get that book and see if that'll get me started on hearing more of the other side.
Yeah, great. And I can give you a tip for that kind of reading is to view it without debating the other person as you go. To take it in. There's an old saying that you really can't absorb a set of ideas unless you allow yourself to fall in love with them, at least temporarily. Okay? That you have to have an affective, like, I want to learn something. This is part of the human experience here that I want to capture, even if at the end of the day, I'm only going to agree with a little bit of it. But I want to, John Wood Jr. talks about patriotic empathy. And that you were doing that kind of empathy around people around gun control and gun rights. Yeah. So somebody else. Yes.
You just got a point of clarification.
We're parliamentary
Point of
procedure.
clarification.
The chair recognizes.
Thank you so very much.
The delegate. Yes.
We both agreed when we read number 3 about criticize your own side. We both had a visceral reaction to the word criticize because isn't that just as bad as criticizing the other? We felt like it should have said recognize the foibles or things in your side instead of criticize.
Okay, so for me, criticize is not a bad word. Criticize is, so feel free to use whatever language you want. But I think being critical, even sharply critical, I mean, look at the founders of the country. Look at, we've had a big debate in our country about the role of government, for example, and going to war, okay? And so for me, criticize is not particularly criticizing ideas. I mean, if you think of, you know, so feel free to do what you want. But for me, and the reason I put that in there is that some people think that Better Angels are just about, it's about being nice. And then don't make anybody uncomfortable with a sharply critical point that is in opposition to their viewpoint. And so for me, that's not what we're doing. It says, I'm not going to attack your motives. I'm going to be respectful, and I'm not going to say you and all your tribe do this. But I might say, I think you're dead wrong on this, and I think you're not actually following the logic of your own position. That's being critical. But for me, it's not being disparaging and so on. So that's why the word is there. It's used there deliberately. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I guess this is also a point of clarification. And we were talking about like the use of humor, because on that first page, it's like, how often do you ridicule the other side or whatever? Like, humor to me is kind of a coping mechanism. So if I don't use some humor, I'm just going to be really angry.
Yeah.
So sometimes if I'm red, and sometimes I think of that like really extreme left-leaning stereotype, and me and my friends rag on that as a way of letting out irritation at the way the world is, because it's so overwhelming and upsetting. So like, how can we maintain that? Because that is a real thing that's going to exist for me in my life, but still not be dehumanizing the individuals.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's where I think of my eavesdroppers experiment. How would some of those folks feel if they were listening in? Probably mocked. And so this is all optional, but I try to now hold myself to not mocking. But of sometimes, but humor and, you know, but the mocking, mocking comes from powerlessness. And that I can't control these people, and they're dominant. Right, they're dominant. Like let's face it, blues control a lot of the cultural mechanisms, right, and the campuses. And so a red coping mechanism can just be to make fun of them. But it actually comes from a sense of helplessness, I think, right? And so I'm not going to go around saying, don't do it. But it's worth saying, what am I not doing by holding back? And it's sort of like when we mock people's religious beliefs and so on. It's, anyway, so that's my view. So it's tricky. It's tricky. It's sort of like laughing about an ethnic group. Kind of, it gets into tricky territory. But thank you for that. Those are great clarification questions. Okay, so are you ready now to work on some skills? Okay. So the last thing we're going to do is work on some skills. Now that you're completely depolarized yourselves, right? Obviously you are, because you've been in the workshop all this time, right? And now we're going to talk about skills for talking to like-minded people when the conversation is veering into stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, contempt. Okay? But before we do that, I want to say what to avoid, because there are risks here. There are risks here. You can come across as judgmental or more enlightened. You're stereotyping others, Cheryl, as something I myself try to avoid doing. She's going to avoid getting together with me next time, okay? Coming across as defensive for the other side. Why are you being so negative about them? I'm attacking you now, and I'm defending the other side. Another one is coming across as contemptuous of both sides. So being cynical is not depolarizing. They're all crooks. And they're all sheep except for you and me. Okay? So that's a kind of pseudo-openness to be, I'm above it all. Okay? And that's not what we're talking about. And then also getting caught up in defending particular leaders or fringe groups. So, so if you're with somebody who is, so I'll just give the blue example. You're with somebody on your side who's just outraged about President Trump. If that person is not saying, and everybody who supports him, how could they possibly, and there must be idiots or whatever. Well, that's the stereotyping thing. That's the polarizing about the nation. If they're not doing that, why get into saying, well, maybe he's more balanced than you think? Okay, I don't know. You could, but that's not what this is about. This is not about intervening on behalf of a particular political leader, if you will. I mean, feel free to do it, but what this workshop is about, when you take tens of millions of people and you put them into one swath, okay? So on page 4, it contains 4 depolarizing skills. And since I made up the names for these, I get to make up the acronyms, so David Lapp, okay? And I emailed David and I said, would you mind me naming the skills for you? And he was honored. So it's listen, acknowledge, pivot, and offer perspective. And so I'll describe these, and then we're going to have a little exercise of trying them out. So the first is, again, I want to remind you, this is not a conversation with somebody who you differ with politically. This is not a red-blue conversation. This is within your blue, within your red, right? Keep that in mind. Listen to the other's values and emotions influencing the stereotyping, ridicule, contempt. Often it's from frustration, fear, worry for the country or groups in the country, or personal experiences of being put down by people on the other side. When there are strong emotions, there's a deeper story there. And so listen for that. So I have a colleague who sees herself as open-minded in so many areas, but boy, when it comes to politics, and particularly President Trump, she's a blue, she is like a different person. And as I listen to her, and she's aware of Better Angels, so I get this. If you publicly identify with Better Angels, people will sort of try this out on you. How could you be in Better Angels kind of thing when this lunatic is running the country? And as I listen to her, there's stuff in her family. She has been continually felt put down by her in-laws, who are Reds. And then she sees her father-in-law as quite patriarchal and anti-feminist, and she's a feminist. She's a blue and a feminist, and so she gets this incoming flack. And they live in the same house. They live on the upper floor of the same house, okay? Up or down floor. So she came across this for reasons, okay? And I just needed to understand that, okay? It helped me to understand the vigor of her dismissal of anybody who could possibly support President Trump in a way that she's much more nuanced than the rest of her life, okay? And so listen for what's going on with somebody. And then acknowledge what you are hearing and share your own worries and concerns. So I'm sorry you had to deal with those folks in your family. And so if you're a blue and you'd be talking to this particular colleague, you would say, yeah, it sounds hard with your family. And remember, she's ridiculing swaths of people. If you were blue and talking to her, you could say something like, I hear you and I'm with you on President Trump, that I think he's terrible. I agree with you. I hope we survive him. Okay, I'm just doing the blue version of this now, okay? You have joined with the person. Or if you're talking about, say, on campuses, and you're talking about with a fellow Red who is saying, you can't say anything. You say a halfway conservative idea around here, and you're going to be shut down. And those liberal professors just want their way, and they would have us all dismissed from campus as a bunch of racist bigots if they could get away with it. All of them. That was the stereotyping part, okay? The first part was a strong view about how conservative views are acknowledged or silenced on campus. And so if you're red, you could say, I'm with you. Yeah, I see this all the time on campus, that if you say something conservative, it's immediately racist. And this is, it really bothers me. So I just agreed with this person's viewpoint. Okay? Now, in a minute, I'm going to try to challenge in some way the stereotyping of all of those professors around the country, all those blue professors who would like to eliminate us. But what I did was acknowledge the feelings, the concern, and in this case, I agreed. I agree with the essence of what this person was saying. What is the advantage of starting that way? Yeah, well, I'm with you on this. I'm basically with you. Yes. Yeah, they felt heard and joined with. See, this is the advantage when you're talking to somebody on your own side. If you basically agree with them, you say that. So on the basics of what you're saying, we're together. It doesn't shut them down. Whereas if you immediately go to a perspective, if you say these professors, they just want to stop us, they just like to get rid of us all, they're infiltrating the whole country and blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, not everybody. I think this is more complicated. I think it's more, then you just had a head of steam, and I just went, boom. And then it looks like I'm going one up at that moment. Like, I have a bigger perspective on this than you do, okay? And then you're gonna come back at me, right? You're gonna say I'm soft on this issue. You're gonna think that that I'm denying any legitimacy to your viewpoint and your feelings, okay? Just as if a blue were to say, Trump is the worst thing ever happened, we have to get him out of here, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, we've had other bad presidents too, and we survived as a country. Well, thank you for that. And they're going to say, well, name some. And then we're going to get a debate whether Andrew Johnson was worse, okay? Because I had not acknowledged, I had not connected. The big norm of all of this communication is connect first. Listen and connect first. Acknowledge before you do anything else. Boom. And whenever I go off, whenever I make a mistake in any of this area, it's when I forget to do that. Because I get triggered, and then I forget to do that. So you acknowledge, you connect. Now, the next skill is a new one, at least for me. Pivot. Pivoting is signaling that you're going to shift the conversation. It's signaling a turn. So if I say, I'm with you on the political correctness run amok, there's no place, it just feels like there's not a place on this campus to have a conservative viewpoint. I'm with you. It's upsetting to me. Then how do I get to some perspective that says it's more complicated, there's more variation, it's not all of the faculty. There are administrators, I think, who are concerned. I've talked to those people. I think there's a counter trend. There's all kinds of perspectives I can have on that. If you heard of the heterodox society that's really trying to change, So I have these, but how do I get there? What I'm suggesting, the best way to get there is to signal that I've been thinking about this recently, or I've been going to a Better Angels workshop, I've been reading about something, and so I've started to think a little differently about it, okay? That's signaling your turn with a pivot. So here's some examples. Be personal here. This is with I statements. I've been realizing that I'm so angry at the other side, I've stopped trying to understand them. So the blue example, I'm so upset with Trump that I've stopped trying to even understand why somebody ever supported him. I've become so worried about our country's polarization that I've started to try to understand the other side better. Or I'm with you and being very concerned about what's going on. Can I throw in another perspective? Can I offer something? I'm with you. Can I offer something additional to the conversation? Or, since taking a Better Angels workshop, I've been learning more about how Reds or Blues are thinking about these issues. Or, I came across an interesting website on this, and so I just wanted to, that got me thinking, and going back to the college thing. I came across something on the web the other day that got me thinking maybe there's some hope out there. I don't know, but I just want to shift. So you're shifting, you're pivoting. Now, in teaching this, this is the hardest skill to get, okay? Because in a pivot, you're not offering additional an alternative viewpoint on the issue. You're signaling you're about to change. If you want to think of a pivot, we're having a conversation, Joyce and you and I are, and then you say something that really bothers me. It's helpful to say, can I bring up something that you just said that kind of threw me a bit? You're going to say yes, you're going to be worried. But I've just sort of signaled there's been some noise in our communication, and I want to shift. I want to say something. We were talking about X, and then I'm going to bring up, but I've signaled the change. Okay, with a colleague, a junior colleague, we were presenting a workshop the other day in my field, and she did a good job. She kind of at one point kind of lost the thread. And so I said, hey, like this, and can I offer some coaching? And she said, sure. And then I offered it, okay? But can you see that there's a transitional statement? I'm signaling that I'm interested in shifting something that's going to come from me next that isn't just what we've been doing. So I want to pause on this one. This is the hardest one for people to get. What's the advantage of what I'm talking about doing, a pivot? Yes? Yeah, it lowers the stress because they're not confused about where you're going, that somehow you're changing you're not changing the topic, but you're going to broaden it in some way. What else? Turn signal. It prepares them. Yeah. So if you were to say, when somebody was on a roll, yeah, I'm with you on my concern about blah, 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 and I hate that, blah, 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 blah. And I went to this Better Angels convention, and so there were some interesting things there that got me thinking about this a little differently, right? It's very simple. It's an iMessage. But what I'm saying is, it's a good thing to do before perspective, and that's the last part. So the perspective is where you offer a depolarizing viewpoint. And here are 5 different kinds of perspective comments. The first is, I have these up here as well. I hope this doesn't fall on you. Want to help me turn that page over? Last time I did this, it fell. No, I actually want to turn it over with the writing. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Perspective. The first is variation. It's on your sheet as well. They all don't think that way. I've been learning that not everyone on the other side thinks that. I've been learning that lots of reasons why people support the president. Okay. I've been learning that on college campuses there are actually a number of faculty who are kind of upset about what's going on. The second is it's more complicated. I see more complexity in why some people support or oppose this idea. I don't think it's just because they're uninformed. Third is they're coming at this from different backgrounds and experiences. Can you see this is putting into words some of what we talked about before when you depolarize yourself? It's easy for me to judge them for supporting such and such, but I'm aware I've not been in their shoes. The fourth is our side hasn't been perfect on this matter. I don't agree with them on this, but our side has ignored the problem for too long. So if you had somebody who was saying the other side takes so much special interest money, it's all about special interest. Well, tell me your side doesn't. So you could say, I agree with you all that money. I don't like that foundation. Blah blah blah. I've been thinking about in this Better Angels work. I've been thinking about how both sides can sometimes be involved, and I think in this case, our side is just as guilty, or is guilty in a major way. And then the last one is it's not useful to dismiss them. They put us down, we put them down, and nothing's working in this country. I've come to the conclusion that we're going to have to understand and respect each other if we're going to solve our country's problems. One RED participant in a Better Angels workshop put it this way, I mentioned this before, neither side is going to vanquish the other, and so we're going to have to figure out how to get along and run the country together. My colleague who I described with the in-laws who lived upstairs, she attended a Depolarizing Within workshop, and that last point really got to her. She told me proudly, next time I saw her, that in a conversation with colleagues, all blue, that went polarizing direction, dismissing, ridiculing, she said, you know, yeah, I'm with you, and I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about where we're going as a country. That was the pivot. That was the pivot. And she said, and I just don't think we're going to get anywhere this way. If we sit here and we put them down and they sit somewhere and they put us down, I just don't think it's effective. So she offered that. She was so proud of herself. I mean, she couldn't disagree with the content of anything, but pragmatically not useful. Pragmatically not useful. So, here's what I want to do with you to practice these skills. Sure.
It seems to me that it might be possible to pivot enough that someone sort of recognizes that you're doing it again, you're pivoting again. Can I agree some coaching on that? I've heard that one a lot of times, and often. Yeah, but is that possible? That we could overuse it, or that we could single it too often?
Oh, sure. You can overuse this, like paraphrasing or something. You can always overuse any skill. But pivoting is basically a way to signal that you've been thinking differently and you want to go somewhere. So anything can be overused. And maybe I shouldn't have even given that example of can I coach you, because that's not in this area. That would be a horrible thing to say in the political area. So yes, things can be overused. Authenticity is everything. If you're overusing a skill, it's because you're trying to control somebody. Okay, so yes, we have to be careful about that. Yes?
Isn't one of the purposes of the pivot to not appear to be criticizing them so that they don't feel defensive?
Big thing with the pivot is to signal that you're going to introduce something into the conversation that they're probably not expecting. I was at a New Year's Eve party in my neighborhood. You can tell the age group because it ended at 10 p.m. Most of the group were of one political persuasion, and I said, I said what I agree with, and I said, I've been doing this Better Angels work, and they sort of knew that. And I said, I'm finding myself thinking about some of this stuff differently. As opposed to just acknowledging, and then essentially, if you don't pivot, I'm not saying you always have to, but if you don't, it sounds like you're saying but. I hear you, but. Okay? I agree with you, but they're not all the same. Even if you don't say but, it can feel like it. And so here's another example. Did you ever listen to, I don't know, a radio station or read a book or something, and there's something completely outside of your knowledge, like somehow people are talking about the Big Bang Theory, that came up or something like that, and you actually happen to listen to a podcast by a physicist. Well, if you're smart, you say, I was listening to this podcast the other day, and this person says something, as opposed to, well, the Big Bang Theory, they're really questioning whether they're going to go, where'd you get that? Where did you come from? And so a lot of us end up doing it kind of unconsciously when we're going to reference how we ended up thinking about this, right? It's a way not to come across like a know-it-all. In this case, it's a way not to just contradict somebody. Now, we're going to practice in a minute, but what I promise you is that if you use these skills, you're going to get a pushback. Person's not going to say, well, thank you. By the way, an elegant pivot. And I appreciated your sharing 3 of the 5 perspectives that now I think very differently about these other people. Even if you do all this elegantly, what are you going to likely get back when you say, I think there's actually a lot of different reasons why people support President Trump, and it's actually pretty complicated. And that's you know, I did my Better Angels. I met these people. I've been reading about this stuff, and I've actually seen there's a lot more variation, a lot more complexity, lots of different reasons. What are you likely to get back? Yeah, but. Oh, give me more. Yeah, what would you say?
Are you saying that?
Yeah, are you saying that? That's right. Or have you turned? I mean, you know, people can see you as what just happened. And that happened on New Year's Eve because the hostess went, what? Some other people sort of went with me, but the hostess, I thought she was going to withdraw the cookies or something, you know? She was completely thrown. Yeah, no, it wasn't here. But, pardon me? This was, yeah, this year. This year, that's right. She was completely thrown. Now, what you do then is you acknowledge, you pivot, and you go back to perspective, okay? And it's sort of like if you're in the same religion together and you offered this other perspective on the religion, and they said, are you still a whatever, a Presbyterian, or what are you? I am still a Presbyterian. I'm a true believing Presbyterian church-going, and I have been reading more, thinking about, learning more, and blah, 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 and this is my current view on our religion. But I'm reassuring you I'm still in. I haven't gone over to the dark side, okay? So you have to be prepared. Sometimes you're delivering something that somebody does not want to hear, and you have to be prepared for them to get reactive. And that means instead of saying, I took the workshop, Bill would have been proud of me for delivering these skills. What's your problem? No, you understand. You understand that you just handed them a hot potato. They weren't expecting it. And you acknowledge, and you stay with them, and then you let go at some point. You don't have to, because the thing I learned about my colleague when it was parking lot conversations after a meeting, and some of them were brief because it was Minnesota in the winter. But what I learned was she kept thinking about what I was saying. And then she went to a depolarizing within workshop, and that clinched it. But she kept thinking about what I was saying. Okay, so here's the practice. I'm going to read 2 polarizing statements, a blue and a red, and I would like you, we're going to go through these, and I would like you to write down an acknowledgement, a sentence that acknowledges what I say. So you're going to listen to me. You can't actually write down the listening. You're going to have to listen, but the write down skill will be the acknowledgement. And I'm going to ask you to practice the skill by writing it down. And then you're going to share it with somebody and call it out. So keep your response to a sentence or 2 for our purposes today. The practice topic is the size and regulatory powers of the federal government. Okay. Blues in general favor a more activist federal government in scope and regulatory authority. Reds in general favor a more limited role for the federal government and emphasize the downside of regulation. Each side is subjected to disparaging stereotypes on these issues. So what are disparaging stereotypes that blues have of reds when it comes to limited government? Just call them out. What if you're a blue, you're talking to fellow blues about limited government, fiscal restraints, and so on. What are the things you're likely to hear that all of those people think? Give me stereotypes. Yeah, they're hypocritical. They're in favor of women's limited government except when it comes to abortion where they want to control. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, more stereotypes. Yeah, they don't give a rip about the environment. In other words, they're so anti-regulation that they would let us die of, yeah, right? I mean, they basically would go back to the 1920s when in Pittsburgh you couldn't see, the nose in front of your face. Because, give me one more. Heartless. Yeah. So the safety net's gone. So those are some examples. So what are some red stereotypes of blues when it comes to the size and scope of the federal government? The nanny state. That's about people's dependency, right? What else? Throwing money at problems. What about the hypocrisy one? There are no hypocrites here? Yeah, with other people's money, but also you grow dependency on the federal government. You have voters, right? You allow illegal immigrants in and give them the vote, they're going to vote your side, okay? These ideals that people have are actually not the real thing. Quick? Well, yeah, that's right. They want to kill babies, right? Okay, so I just wanted to get you into the stereotyping thinking here. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the blue side. I'm going to launch into what a polarized blue might say about reds who favor limited government. Then I'll do the same for a polarized red and what they say. And you can choose either one to write an acknowledgement on. In others, I'm going to do two. And you can write an acknowledgement of what you've heard, which is you heard what I said, and then you can write a practice statement that basically is agreeing with me about the issue, but not about the stereotyping of all the people. So the best way to start might be when you hear the stereotype coming from your own color group, write that out, but for extra credit, you can do both of them, okay? Because the point is to practice the skill. Okay. So I'm going to give you this statement, and you're going to listen to me, and you're going to write down a 1 or 2 sentence acknowledgement. Okay. I'm going to deliver these with gusto, by the way. So this is the blue. Conservatives say they're for limited government, but what they really want is for the rich to get richer. And the best way to do that is to take from the poor and working class people. They believe in a society of winners and losers, with the winners deserving most of the pie and the losers being blamed for their own misfortune, even though the winners usually start out with lots of advantages. Reds are basically heartless about the poor, would strip away the social safety net if they could get away with it. What amazes me is how many Americans get duped by this conservative approach to government. Now I'm going to read the red one. Liberals say they want a federal government to provide opportunities for people on the margins, but they're hypocrites. They know that these welfare programs trap millions of people into dependency on the government. What that means is more votes for their party, the government gets bigger and bigger. Blues want to create a society where everyone gets the same outcomes in life, no matter how much effort they put into their own success. When they talk about equality, that's what they mean. Put the blues in charge and they will crush personal initiative and ruin the economy. What amazes me is how many Americans get duped by this liberal approach to government. So your job now is to write a sentence or two that acknowledges, not your own, it acknowledges, it joins with me on the substantive content on this. And you can do both if you like. Okay. So if you're a blue, you're hearing your fellow blues say these are heartless people who don't give a rip about most people. They just want the rich to get rich. Okay? They don't give a rip. And you're amazed that Americans don't see that. If you are a red, you're hearing them say, this person say, that blues really want to grow government for their own power. And that they don't care really about people being dependent because this is going to help them. And so you're just acknowledging, you're not, okay? You're just acknowledging now, agreeing with what you can agree on. So about 30 more seconds. So just a sentence or two of acknowledging what I said and what you might agree with if you're my fellow color. But you're not contradicting me. Okay, just a few more seconds. So what I'd like you to do, you don't have to finish it up, but I'd like you to turn to your partner, pair partner again, and I would just have 2 minutes on this. Read them what you said and explain why you think it's an acknowledgement, and then have the other person do the same thing. Just 2 minutes. Go.
So when I was talking, I'll do it in the same order. When I was talking to the red, I go, I'm worried as well about how unsustainable big government is and how much waste there is. I'm also worried about taking care of the most vulnerable in our society. In fact, you saying as much as you did is helpful. I thought, because it's like sort of cast the net. So I can pick something to
Yeah, so that's helpful. I'll add that into the teaching. Just pick one of them. Yeah. If somebody's going to rank it, just pick one. Pick one. I'm with you on that. And then they go, oh, you're my fellow. Yeah. You got it. Yeah, so, that's right. So it's not a paraphrase. Yeah. It's just an acknowledgement. Yeah, so that's a good point. I'll add that into the teaching, that it's not a, because otherwise it's just a lot to take in and paraphrase. But you just have to have. Yeah. Yeah. So you just listen for something. The train, I can grab that rail. Yeah. Okay. Back here. Shh. We're going to go in and out of the small groups quickly, so thank you for coming back. Group over here. Shh. Thank you. Okay. So now I'd like you to try some things out with me, if you're willing to. And I'd like you to just say my name, so Bill, and then give me an acknowledgement. Yes.
So I'm speaking to you, we're both Reds.
We're both Reds.
Bill, I really agree with you on the importance of personal responsibility and the work ethic.
Yeah, great. Yeah, he just joined with me on that. One of the things we're saying up here is that you don't have to paraphrase what the whole message was. You just have to find something to connect on, which is what you did. Okay, so give me a blue, give me an example. A blue example. And by the way, some people did both, so that's fine. So you want to do blue. Yeah, try blue.
Okay, I'm also worried about how we're taking care of the most vulnerable, and I'm afraid we're going to have a continual divide between the haves and the have-nots if we don't deal with it.
So I just said the Reds don't care, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't remember everything.
Yeah,
but,
basically. So I'm not sure that. Did
it
we
was
switch
something
color?
about. Well, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That's not. Yeah.
something stood up for me that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So just get back into your mind that I say Reds are basically selfish. They don't care about the poor, and so a blue is going to respond with. Actually, you don't have to identify as red or blue. You're just going to practice a blue response. In this workshop, you don't have to be a red or blue. I mean, here we have all these lanyards, but in this workshop, anybody can try out any skill. Okay. You don't have to identify as red or blue. So give me as if we are fellow blues.
All right.
Bill, that's an interesting point, but I wonder if it's more complicated than Republicans not caring about people other than rich people.
Okay, so thank you. So you moved on to perspective. Okay, so thank you. I'm glad you did it because it allows me to teach. Because right now, I always look forward to that. So right now, I'm not interested in a perspective. I just want you to acknowledge and agree with something I just said. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I agree with you about I think the other side don't pay enough attention to poor people and that some people can suffer. I mean, that would be an example. That there's going to be, I agree with you that red policies are going to, could really hurt a lot of people on the lower levels of our society. Okay, that would be an example. Yeah.
Okay.
Bill.
Before I start,
yeah.
This is a little different, so I'm sure you're going to have a comment about it. Bill, I understand and agree to some extent with what you just said.
Okay. It might be good to give me a little more.
A little more meat?
A little more meat. What did you agree with?
What you just said. Don't you remember?
You're right, I am. So I just made 8 or 9 points. So it would be helpful to, anyway, it was fine, but it would be helpful to, I'm going to feel a little bit more connected with if you give me a little content. That's all I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with it.
So what I was referring to was the phrase, agree to some extent with what you have just said. So it's not a total acknowledgement.
Yeah,
it's
so
a partial acknowledgement.
yeah, but now I'm set up for an argument.
So that's what I wanted you to comment on.
Thank you, appreciate it. What I'm most interested in is for you to find something I said that you can put into your own words that was agreeing with something that I said, but without the wild exaggerations. Yeah, some feedback about where you're with me. And I wouldn't say to some extent because then I'm thinking, oh, he's gonna come after me. Okay, somebody else over here? Oh, yeah.
Sometimes,
Bill? Yeah.
Sometimes it seems they don't fully realize what people are up against.
Okay, and so.
I was a blue talking to you as a blue.
Yeah, so say it again.
Bill, sometimes, I agree that sometimes it seems the Reds, don't fully realize what people are up against.
Yeah, okay. Now, when you put in the rest of it, then I got it. That I agree with you that I think the Reds often don't appreciate what people are up against. So that nailed it. The first time I wasn't sure. It's really good to have an I in there and refer to them. Okay, great. Okay, so I want to move on. This is actually the easiest one. Okay, but remember, you're agreeing with something, you're with me on some aspect of this, okay? And as we were talking over here, if I do a rant, you could just pick one thing. So this is not the paraphrase skill we talk about in the workshop. You don't have to get, remember everything I said. Just something in there, okay? And I think they missed the boat on such and such, right? Okay, now pivot. And so I'm going to give you the startup line here, and that is, this would be true for both, that what amazes me is how many people get duped by this conservative or liberal approach to government. What amazes me, so this is the stereotyping part of it now, right? What amazes me is how many people get duped by that side. So that's to get you back into it. And you have acknowledged, and now I'd like you to practice writing a pivot. Remember, the pivot is an I statement that's going to signal that you're going to shift the conversation. But it does not get you into a perspective, right? So you're not going to, she's looking at me. So thank you for your mistake, because it's so tempting to immediately get into the perspective. You're not sharing a perspective on the role of government. You're sharing something about you shifting.
An acknowledgement that you're now asking us to add a pivot to?
No, I just repeated my polarizing statement so that you could have something to anchor as you get into a pivot. Because your acknowledgement did not make me shift at all. I just said, yeah, you agreed with me. I agree, yeah, those people, I don't know why they, I'm still polarized. But now I feel like you probably agree with me. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'll just talk to her. So take a minute, unless you have another question, to write down a pivot statement. This is the hardest one. Do not offer a perspective on the role of the government or on that other party. Signal that you've been thinking about this differently. You want to talk about this in some other way.
Yeah, the one that we're supposed to be doing a pivot to.
Yeah. I can't believe how many Americans get duped by this liberal or conservative person.
So you want us to do an acknowledgement
No,
and
you've
a
done an
pivot?
acknowledgement. Now we're just doing a
Just
pivot.
do a pivot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell me you're going to shift in some way.
Okay.
So 30 more seconds. Okay, would you now pair up again? 1 minute each, share your pivot, say why you thought it was a pivot. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I like it. She just ran to the restroom. She'll be here.
Okay, back here. Ding, 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 ding. Shh. Okay. Shh. Thank you. Oh, I heard just thank you for sharing here. Okay, so would somebody, again, what I've gone on my rant, you've acknowledged where you agreed, I've come back a little bit, yeah, I have no idea why those crazy people all do that, and now you're going to just compose a pivot, and so you don't have to use my name on this one, but just try it out. Yep.
This was my original one, and then we've come to modify it.
Oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a team with you in the conversation? Could we do a timeout now? I need to prepare with my colleagues over here. I'll be right back. Okay,
so that
try.
we can remain friends. The original thing I had put was, yes, large government does create much dependency.
Yeah, and
growth.
then you realized that that was a perspective.
No, I'm saying how I set it up. Didn't you want to hear what I said before? You don't want to hear that part.
No,
Okay,
I just want to hear the good one.
I said a recent podcast I heard explored this topic, looking at recent statistics. And my colleague said statistics was really a hot button that turned her off, because statistics would say that I have the answer, and statistics can be put on one side or the other to prove anything. So I should modify it to say that that I've been looking at recent ideas.
Okay, well, thank you. So that's a pivot. I've been looking at recent ideas. Now, I don't think statistics, just a personal viewpoint, you're talking to somebody who basically agrees with you. I think the statistic thing is a little more tricky. Well, no, but in this practice, you are. And so there's some things that might turn off somebody the other color, but wouldn't necessarily bother your own person. So it was useful feedback, because, what's the idea that, liars and stacks, right? But here's you're with somebody, so I think it would be okay. So you've acknowledged, and they said, I heard this podcast, and it got me thinking. I got some new ideas on this. That is a pivot. Somebody else want to give me a pivot?
I'm curious if you see this one as a pivot or not.
I'll let you know if I don't.
Yeah,
Tom.
no, I might get it wrong, and that's
yeah. And he's the chair of the board here, right? So.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how we can be more successful in changing their minds.
Interesting. It is a pivot.
Or more effective.
It is a pivot, but the danger is that it sounds like you've accepted the stereotyping. Yeah, I think it's a pivot. It is a pivot, but it gets you into the. What I'm interested in where you're going next is to depolarize or de-stereotype. So I think it gets out a little bit ahead, but it is a pivot. It is a pivot. Yeah.
I think I really have a pivot. I just wonder if there's more to think about.
Okay, that is a pivot. It sounds like a bit of a challenge. It depends how you say it. So say it again, and this time say it in a way that you definitely don't want me to feel like I'm being challenged.
I just wonder if there might be more to think about.
Okay, yeah, the gentle, yeah. And the ideal pivot would be to, that's a pivot. That's a pivot, yeah. But the gentle tone helped me not think, oh, there's something, she's going to come after me on this. Yes.
I've been realizing that my anger and aversion to all of these government programs has made me stop seeing why good people might support them.
Oh, whoa. Yeah, I'm aware that my anger about this has gotten me to think about why good people, yeah, that's a pivot. That's a pivot, yeah. My wife, Leah, who's out there and who checked everybody in, she was on the original bus tour and was in that role, the bus tour where we went around the country. And so when she's at curves and quilting groups and conversations veer into nastiness, she says, I hear you on that. and when I was on this Better Angels bus tour, I heard just lots of people, very different kinds of folks. And so it changed my perspective. And then they go, oh, I want to hear about that, okay? Before saying, well, not everybody thinks this, that. So the best ones are self-referential, okay? And now, thank you, now we're going to go to perspective. And so now that you've done this great job, there are these, I'd like you to compose a perspective statement from a red or blue or both perspective on the stereotyping, keeping in mind that the stereotype is all of those people on the red side give not a rip about the poor people, about the environment. They just want the rich to get richer, starve the government. And the people on the blue side just want to grow government, make people, dependent on government, and bigger the better. And so variation, you can do a variation one. Basically some version, I think they're not all like that. I think the ideas behind the other side are more complicated. People come from different life experiences, and they approach government differently. Our side isn't perfect on this, or it's not useful when we put them all in the same category and kind of put them down. So write one or more perspective comments. Now. And as you're doing this, focus on the disparagement, the contempt, the lumping everybody together more than just the issue of the size of government, okay? It's about what I'm saying about people, not just issues. Okay, 30 more seconds. Okay, so in the interest of time, we're going to skip the pairs and just have some of you just give me a perspective statement. Okay, go for it.
They probably all represent slightly different understandings of the interplay between personal responsibility and the role of government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, yeah. You're saying there's complexity here and there's variation. They don't all. Okay, yep.
I've been learning that some Reds, or whatever term we're using, I've been learning that some Reds actually care very deeply about people. They just have different approaches that they think will be more effective.
Ooh, nice, very nice, very nice.
I think they might be coming from a different background or experience from ours. If I had grown up poor and felt that I had no way out, or if I grew up in a family where my father had been killed by an unregulated industry, I might feel a lot more like they do.
Ooh, yeah. Mhm.
I know many progressives that own strong and thriving businesses.
Right, right. So that's a good one too, because the stereotype is if you're blue, you couldn't possibly be in the business world, right? Which is crazy because 90% of people are in the business world, right? So that's a sort of a quick demographic one to get in there, right? And what you're doing, which I like, you're saying I statements on this. You're not just saying, well, there's a lot of blues in the business world too, but you said I know this or I've seen this, right? When you soften it when you say I, as opposed to I'm smarter than you. Didn't you know? Okay. So I want to keep going with some others. Oh, yeah, I got to keep going. Yeah.
I know not all people are irresponsible, so maybe
Say it a little more slowly. Yeah.
I know not all people are irresponsible, so maybe they have a different goal in mind.
Okay. Yeah. So you've gotten into a little more of the complexity of where people's experiences are. This is actually, when you set this one up this way, this is the easiest skill, right? Because you're now offering a perspective that there's more variety, more complexity, people have different life experiences. They're not all the same. They're not, that was the theme here, and that people come from different backgrounds. It's more complicated, not everybody, right? And it's a way in. Now, you're going to get a pushback, and then I'm going to back to, well, if they're in business, they should know better then. Okay? And then you're going to acknowledge, I hear you on that. Sometimes it confuses me too. Okay? Why some folks in the business world don't, it confuses me too. And then you can reference some other thing. I did this Better Angels thing, and if you, in Minnesota, you could see, maybe you brainwashed me, I don't know. But I'm seeing this as more complicated now, and so I'm with you on your concern. Basically, you're saying, I'm with you on a big part of your concern. I'm not with you on all those people being deluded. I wouldn't say it that directly, but that's really what you're saying. And then you get a pushback, and you reassure them you're still a red or a blue. You still share their concerns, and then you keep at it for a while, okay? And then you let it go. They don't have to agree with you, but they will think about it. And in my own life, when I've had stereotypes don't we all live with stereotypes? In some ways, you can't function in the world without stereotypes. We almost can't, okay? And then somebody comes along, I have a relationship where they challenge me on it, and I go, oh, okay. And they do it in a respectful way, not in a smarty pants way. And then it stays with me. And I think about it some more. And so the last thing I want to say as we finish up is it's just some final comments, and appreciated your being with me here today. These are just my notes, not on yours, but being a depolarizer is not just being high-minded. It's also pragmatic about the future. That many of our differences today have been around in some form since the founding of the country. They're not going to disappear. This size and scope of the government, that was Jefferson and Madison and Adams and Jefferson and Hamilton, right? I mean, just huge. It's been there. And it's, I think, a necessary tension. It's a necessary tension, and it's not going to go away. Our current whipsaw approach to polarized policymaking, as I've said, leads to undoing everybody's policies. Every 4 years, we get to be paralyzed and cynical. And secondly, your depolarizing influence in your social circles is apt to occur over time, not necessarily in any individual conversation or with every individual. If you come across as genuine and use these skills, people are likely to remember what you said and think about it. A long-term goal would be to be able to explain the other side's views in such a way that they would say, you got it. Now that's a long-term goal. You have to really understand the other side so that when I say, I think this is what you're saying, you go, you nailed it, okay? Because mostly when we characterize the other side, we do it from our own side's language and perspective. If you can do it from the other side's perspective, okay, and you can represent that to people in your world, like with the gun thing, right? I mean, you could do that. You could, you were doing that. You represent one side to the other, even though you don't want to give up your guns, right? And it's a powerful, it's a patriotic empathy based on some deeper understanding of where people are coming from. And it's really quite powerful. Now, if you really want to take the road less traveled, you could practice identifying your inner conservative side if you're a liberal, and your inner liberal side if you're a conservative. Yeah, right, she's laughing. Make sure you see these as positive aspects of yourself, not your inner selfishness if you're a blue, or your inner irresponsibility if you're a red. But these would be, so for example, the committed traditionalist in some areas of life for a liberal, and openness to rapid change for a conservative. I mean, liberals and conservatives differ in some sort of larger worldviews about sort of like, conservatives in general, more interested in saying, well, there's some traditions here, there's some reasons why some things exist, and maybe you should be paying attention to them. Not all social change is good social change. A lot of liberals in certain areas actually feel the same way. And similarly, lots of reds say, no, we got to change that puppy. That's not working. And we got to blow that up in certain areas. And if you can say, well, that's actually some of my inner conservative, my inner liberal, it allows you to not have the polarity that I'm all red or I'm all blue. So the other resides in me as part of me and part of something I value about myself. So when I end with a story of the effect of this workshop on the most polarized blue I know. This is a guy, he heard about Better Angels, so I'd run into him, and he would say, God love you, but those people. And he would tell me, and this is a blue who deals with a lot of people in the construction industry, in the repair industry. This is a guy who owns apartment buildings. And he gave me permission to tell the story without his name. And he would tell people, you vote for Trump, you're wearing a MAGA hat, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. How do you live with yourself? That's pretty polarized, would you say? And then he told me if he knew that somebody had voted for Trump and was a conservative or Republican, he wouldn't rent to them. He would not rent to them. And he told me red is not a protected class. So do we have good credentials here for being a polarized? And he took a skills workshop, a Better Angel skills workshop, which he liked but didn't change him that much. And basically what he said at the end was, God love you if you're doing your work, okay? Kind of like you're a conscientious objector, Bill, but there's a war here, okay? And then he took the Polarize Within workshop, and I ran into him a couple weeks later, and I get emotional when I tell the story, so I'll do that, and we'll just end here. His eyes were moist as he told me. He said, that workshop, that really got to me. And he said, particularly that line that neither side is going to vanquish the other, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get along around the country together. And so he told me that he had like 4 conversations with Trump voters in the last couple weeks. And this is a blue who deals with more Trump voters than most, right? And he said, what I said to them was, you have every right to support this president. I disagree with you, but I respect your right to do that. And then he said that line about we're going to have to figure out a way to run the country together. And then he said, and this is where he started to cry, and I started to cry. He said, there are people in power who want us to hate each other, and let's not do it. Yeah. So he's a better angel now. So thank you all for coming. I had a good time with you. Okay.
Test.
Do something.
1 minute.
I'm going to have them pair up first.
I love that so much,
Yeah.
so that you're getting some already talked
So everybody's answering the question, and then you do some popcorn, and then we'll hand it back to you when the energy flags a little bit, and we. Yeah, yeah, cool.
Come on back, friends.
Marisa, you're not saying there are still people in the lobby, are you?
I think there are still people in the lobby, but I was
Because
shamed
they-
about making jokes while
they
we were
made a-
waiting for people to come back. So
There's always
no.
that danger.
I don't want to make any jokes.
No, it is, yeah, okay. Because they did so much better before and they're not in their seats yet. All right, we're all going to come back to order now. I want to let people know, I am a progressive, I'm a blue, I'm from California. I am very much for the banning of all plastic garbage bags, but plastic ponchos, I'm thinking they're a good idea, and I'm
I
gonna
support that.
Yeah, I'm going to write my legislator not to ban those. It being exactly 5 o'clock, or a little bit, we're going to have the session come back to order. It's 5:02. At this point, we had a lot of different things that happened in the breakout groups, and Bill Doherty is going to lead a little bit of a way for us to reflect on here about what happened in each of those. So here is Bill.
We're not going to reflect on each of those. Don't you hate those report outs from groups? Where everybody acts as if the rest of us care about the 12th point that actually only one person in the group made. So that's what we'll do. No. What I'd like to do is to pose a question for all of us to reflect on and then talk about in pairs, and then to do some popcorn sharing with the whole group. And the question is, based on what we experienced today, you experienced today, what is something that you're going to take home and you're going to be thinking about more, that just sort of is there for you and you want to explore it, and learn more, or something you're going to do? Some way it's going to affect your behavior, your thoughts, right? So this sort of, not a repetition of the great things you shared today. So no speeches like that, okay? But something that you took in that you're going to think about, that you may want to act on, okay? You get that idea? Thoughts or actions? Does the chair recognize? So Donna, yeah, are you going to mess me up here? No.
No, what I'm going to think about is some of the people.
No, this is a different process. What are you doing?
I'm just saying that I'm.
So there's not time for sharing.
I'm not sharing.
No, it's not time. I'm going to set up a process. Man. Did you see that attempted hijack? And Donna's like me. The world can never have too many extroverts because we think people care what we have to say. So anyway, Donna. So here is the process. Here is the process. I'm going to give us all about 30 seconds of personal reflection. I'll repeat the question. And then when I say go, I'd like you to pair up with somebody. And you don't have to do red or blue, just some living, breathing human being next to you. Okay? Won't that be a pleasure? It doesn't have to be red, blue. And so you'll be pairing up just for 3 minutes to process that question of what's something you got from today that you're going to be thinking about more, or that you may want to do something with when you're home. Is the question clear enough? Okay. And so about 30, don't start talking yet. Another extrovert. They're all up in the front. Okay, I need to rely on the people in the back, the introverts in the back. So 30 seconds of personal reflection, after which I will say go, and then you're going to pair up, but you're not going to leave a poor third person alone at the end, but you're going to aim for pairs because you only have 3 minutes. Okay. So once again, what's something you learned, experienced today that you're going to think about when you go home? Or try to take action on. 30 seconds, personal reflection. Okay, pair up, 3 minutes, go.
But it's exhausting, you know, to do this as people need this a little bit of time.
Of course, yeah. So, yeah, because otherwise it just throws off.
Yeah.
So which event are you going to tonight, Bill? Are you going to the Black Lives Matter and Tea Party talk or the debate?
Yeah, Black Lives Matter, yeah. Yeah, how about you?
Same.
Yeah. And we're a little bit behind on things because David Blankenhorn wants my ideas for the conversation after the interview, but we haven't met yet on it.
Oh, there's plenty of time.
What you
time.
don't want to do is an open mic.
No.
The dreaded open mic. At April's Weave conference, with that conference in D.C., John Wood gave a great talk on race, and then they had an open mic.
No.
Hijacked.
No.
5 African-American speakers. The first one I clocked was at 8 minutes she went on.
Well, and that sets the tone, and you've now entrained the group to say, well, I get my 8-minute speech. Yeah, I agree. You and I do it differently, and we're both a little more, which I think is good, the different styles, but more on the directing side. And it's because there's a responsibility to the group. So I know this person's a little pissed, that person is frustrated, but the whole group gets moved along, and that's better. And every comedian knows it's better to lead when there's energy than when things are died off.
Ask, 3 minutes. Oh, wouldn't it be great to do more?
It always
leave them
is.
one more.
If you don't, right? If you don't cut them off there, then it's going to be.
And in the skills workshop, the extroverts complain they don't have enough time. The introverts are dying at the end of 3 minutes. Dying. So we'll need the runners. Okay, make sure we get some gender diversity too. Sounds good. Okay, clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. 3 times if you can hear me. Oh, we're getting so good. Okay. Oh, man, everybody's quiet. This is amazing. You guys have trained them well. I think your threats to tell jokes. Okay, so now we'll just have some time in popcorn fashion for some folks to share just your own reflection on something you're going to take with you to think about or act on, or maybe even something that came up in common in your pair, but that's not necessary. So who would like to start? And if you could say your name and where you're from, and then make your point.
Do I stand or not? Yes, please. Okay.
Yep.
William Ellis, I'm from Bloomington, Indiana, co-chair there. One of the things we identified, we're in the grassroots thing, and on how to recruit. Mostly Reds, is actually all Reds in that group. And I really think that what we really need to do is be able to talk the language of Reds or talk the language to Blues, whatever we recruit to. And one of the action steps I'm going to do when I get back, I'm also the chairman of the local Republican Party in Monroe County, Indiana. I'm going to reach out to Greg Pence, who's a congressman, hopefully Mike Pence through him, Richard Murdoch, a couple other noted conservatives, because I think we need to have a face of a conservative that is pro-Trump on the website and that shows people that Better Angels is not just for moderates, but are for conservatives too.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, go for it.
Paul Norris, San Francisco. Something that I think I learned today is there can even be things inside the family here, that feel like ruptures and, feel like really uncomfortable and kind of just basically suck. But then there can be repair. And after the repair, it's like even better than it was before the rupture.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, lovely. It's like a marriage. Yes. And we got 3 Reds in a row here. Oops. Yeah, that's not. Have to turn it on. Bruce France. It's Bruce France from New York. Oh, here you go. Here you go. Behind there. Come out so we can see you, Bruce.
First of all, it's the work that we do with this is very difficult and challenging, and coming to something like that is very rejuvenating to me. And the real takeaway, the biggest takeaway so far is the work that we did on political leaders and getting to them. Albany is the capital of New York. We have a lot of opportunity to do what you've done in Minnesota, and I think we need to take advantage of that.
So who was leading that session?
Bill Doherty.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure it was completely clear to the group.
I told them that the next person in the room, the next person in the room would know Bill Doherty'd been here because the chairs were all in a circle.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So who wants to also talk about me and my set? Oh, no, we can move on. We can move on.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Melvin Whitfield. I'm from Columbia, Maryland. And one of the things, I think the main thing that I'm going to go back home and do is to work on that chart, the 5 + 5 = 10,000. I'm going to be hard pressed to meet 5 Blues, much less 5 Reds. But I'm going to start with my family, which is composed of blue and red, and then work from there. But in a political season like right now, with the debates coming up, several debates, I'm going to cook, invite folks over, and then make my pitch to them at that, that event. So
we want to see photos and recipes. Okay, wonderful. Yes. Who's next?
Hi, Randy Freeman from New Jersey. One of the things I'm taking with me is that I could never have the energy of Bill Doherty.
We can move on, actually.
Okay,
yes,
sorry.
Yeah,
No,
the joke is outplayed now. Yeah. Go.
What, did somebody else say that? Anyway, what I am taking with me is the whole notion that we have to somehow have our politicians hear us. And I began thinking right away about who do I know, who knows whom, and can I talk to them? Can I ask, you were saying, and we know somebody else that actually ran for Congress in New Jersey, and he has some connections. So my mind went right to that, and I hope to take that, and I hope we can all do that, because if our politicians don't hear us, then what good is it? So.
Great, thank you.
Bill?
Yes.
I'm Elizabeth Weiner. I'm from Springfield, Missouri, and I think one of the things I've had to come to terms with today is that in spite of lots and lots and lots of formal education, I'm really very ignorant about a lot of important things that have to do with the work that we're doing. And so I'm going to be reading a lot more about the conservative side of things, but I'm also going to be reading a lot about basic history. I mean, I haven't looked at the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence in decades. I'm going to pull all that stuff up, and I'm going to educate myself. That's what I'm taking home.
Beautiful. Wow. Beautiful. Yes.
Hi, Owen Hughes, Connecticut. I think one of the takeaways for me that is the difficulty, for me at least right now, of figuring out how I'm going to pitch this experience to the people I know. Because if I take it to the sort of first reaction level, I would sound crazy. And yet it is not simply a bland report on communication skills.
Yeah.
This is profound. And figuring out how to deliver that to an audience which is busy and skeptical is a challenge for me.
Oh, okay. Over here, yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rick Olson from Prior Lake, Minnesota. And before I participated in a debate earlier this week, I really wasn't that thrilled with that concept, so I thought it was going to be a departure from really our original mission of being able to learn how to listen better and how to express ourselves in a way that we would not offend the other. But after participating in that, and actually then now 3 here at this conference, what I perceive is debates would be a really good way to draw in Reds. We've had a great deal of difficulty in attracting Reds to some of our workshops and so forth. But I know a lot of my friends who are Republicans, all they want to do is they want to argue with Democrats.
and beat them.
Yeah, well, they would hope to, anyway. Yes. And so the idea of a debate, even though it's going to be a moderated and a structured debate, might be more attractive than coming to a forum or a workshop and singing Kumbaya.
We actually don't sing Kumbaya, but anyway. We sing We Shall Overcome.
No, it's Puff, the magic dragon.
And Puff the Magic Dragon. And Blowing in the Wind. And many other blues songs. And I never understood why they don't like that on the others. Anyway, yes. So let's get a little gender and color diversity here in our comments. Anybody else? Did I just stifle it all? Okay, here we go.
LaVonna from Colorado. I attended a policy session, and I really got invigorated by that, of how the work that people are doing can be shared with all of us here. So we can then take some of the things they've already worked on, take them to our communities and get a yes or no on those things until we have the majority, and then we can take some action nationally on that, which really energizes me. I don't even have an alliance in my community yet, but it energizes me to get to work.
Great, wonderful, wonderful. So we have 2 more hands, and then we'll finish up.
I'm Nirvera Costa. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. And something I've been thinking a lot about all day since yesterday is the language that we use, as the gentleman over here said, about being careful that we don't use alienating blue language when we're talking to red people. But it came up in a conversation about race, of being careful that we're not just using white language. And today when I attended a seminar on the religion, are we only talking Christian religion? And I've been thinking about it just in so many ways of that we are diverse people and have so many different ways that our language gives us away sometimes. And I'm not sure how much we can control the way we speak. It's hard to learn a new language when you're an adult, but we can try.
Great, thank you. Last comment.
Hi, I'm Randy Freeman's husband. I learned, I think, a critical tidbit in the media session today. Karen O'Connor said that 700 people signed up to join Better Angels the day after Better Angels was mentioned in a David Brooks op-ed piece. And it just struck me that we need to find the ways to get the exposure with people that are major influencers so we can really scale this thing, because the 2020 election is already heating up, and we need to impact before it gets out of control.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna hand it back over to our chair. Donna, did you want to say something? No.
I'm surprised.
What I'm taking back home with me is the knowledge that already 4 people have come up to me and said that they would like to be a state coordinator. Yes? Yeah, 5. Excuse me. What? Roe from Rhode Island. 5. So you are heartily welcome to that meeting for state coordinators at 9 o'clock, Bears Den. Thank you very much.
Okay, not to be outdone, several people have come up to me and said that they have fundraising experience and would like to help with fundraising, so that's really...
Thank you, Bill, for leading the feedback session. Donna, David. I am going to call up Kelly to give us a couple of announcements, and then we are going to adjourn for today.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Good. So, a few announcements. First of all, some of you are wondering about your thermostats. There are thermostats in your dormitories. They want you to be comfortable, but not too comfortable. So, it can go up 3 degrees and down 3 degrees on little arrows. If yours seems to be really weird or not working, someone was telling me there are arrows, but it doesn't do anything, and I don't know what's happening, and it might be broken, so let me know, and I'll talk to the university staff. Another thing, if you arrived today for whatever reason, and you don't have a key card for your room if you're staying on campus, or you don't yet have a meal card, meet me at the info desk after we adjourn. And the last thing has to do with lost materials. Albert Eisenberg has lost a composition notebook of a very important nature for him. So if you come across that composition notebook, if you could leave it at the info desk. It does have his name on the first page, black and white. So those are all of my announcements. And if you're a praying type, let's pray for no rain tomorrow. If you're not the praying type, then speak to the universe, okay? Because we don't want rain tomorrow. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Kelly. All right, so before we adjourn, I just want to give a couple of reminders for tonight. We are having dinner in the same dining hall as our previous meals. That is from 6 to 7 p.m. And then this evening you have 2 choices, either the Lessons for Better Angels from the Tea Party and Black Lives Matter, which is here. That is from 7:15 to 8:45, or a debate on American identity in Ursa's stage side, which is where we checked in, featuring Alexandra Hudson, Ciaran O'Connor, Sage Snyder, John Wood, and Adam Garfinkel. And April is moderating that. You guys probably have this too, but I just want to give a reminder. And then we will be back here in the morning at 8:30 a.m. Breakfast is 7:30 to 8:20. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All right, then we are adjourned. Oh, I heard no objections, so we're adjourned.